Have you ever walked through a city and wondered what it remembers? Not just the steel and glass that rises today, but the ancient voices buried beneath its soil, the echoes of 1,000 footsteps, the whispers of lost languages, the prayers once carried in the wind. If you stand still enough, long enough, and let the noise of the present fade, you might just hear the past breathe through the cracks of Los Angeles. But long before there was a name, before it was called anything at all, this land lived and breathed in silence, unmarked by borders, untouched by concrete. There were only hills and rivers, wild oaks and open sky. There were people here, not immigrants or settlers, but the first true children of the earth, the Tongva. For thousands of years, they lived where the sun gently kissed the coast, where the rivers ran like silver veins and the land yielded without protest. They didn't call it Los Angeles. They called it Yanga, the place of the poison oak. It was sacred, it was home, and it needed no other name. But history does not stand still. It wanders, it collides, it conquers. And in the late 1700s, as the world beyond the oceans shifted and roared, Spain looked west. Colonization was not just a mission. It was a divine order, carved into cross and sword alike. And so came the missionaries, cloaked not only in religion, but in power. Men like Father Junipero Serra, men who believed they were saving souls even as they broke them. In 1769, an expedition led by Gaspar de Portola and accompanied by Father Juan Crespi stumbled upon a river. To them, it was a discovery. To the Tongva, it had always been sacred. But the missionaries named it El Rio de Nuestra Señora la Reina de los Ángeles de Porciúncula, the River of Our Lady, Queen of the Angels of Porciúncula. A name too long for time, but not too heavy for faith. Porciúncula, a name borrowed from a small chapel in Assisi, Italy, where Saint Francis himself once knelt in silence. That little Italian chapel would lend its spirit to a river halfway across the world. And the river gave way to a dream. A pueblo, a town that would rise near its banks under the Spanish flag and the Christian cross. On September 4th, 1781, 44 settlers, men, women, and children, arrived. Not conquistadors, not aristocrats, but common people. Most of them were of mixed race, indigenous, African, and Spanish descent. They were poor, but they carried with them something heavier than gold: hope. They named their settlement El Pueblo de Nuestra Señora la Reina de los Ángeles de Porciúncula, the town of Our Lady, Queen of the Angels of Porciúncula. It was a name of reverence, of breath and burden, a name that tried to hold heaven in its syllables. But names, like cities, are shaped by time. They are shortened, simplified, forgotten, and reborn. And so El Pueblo de Nuestra Señora became simply Los Angeles, the angels. But the angels weep in silence too. What the settlers built came at a cost. The Tongva, whose spirits still sang through the trees, were displaced, enslaved, converted, or killed. The missions, for all their candles and hymns, became places of labor and loss. The land that had once breathed freely was now divided, claimed, renamed, reimagined. And yet, despite the tears in its soil, the city began to grow. Mexico would claim it next. In 1821, after a long and bitter fight, Mexico won independence from Spain. Los Angeles, still a small pueblo, now flew a new flag. There was a hope that things might change, that the land might return to its people, that the violence of the past could be washed away by revolution. But revolutions have short memories. Just 25 years later, the American flag rose above the hills. In 1846, during the Mexican-American War, U.S. forces seized Los Angeles. 2 years later, it was official. California was now part of the United States. The city, once Tongva, then Spanish, then Mexican, now belonged to America. But to whom did the land really belong? As the stars and stripes settled in, so too did the dreamers. Gold had been found in the north, and it lit a fire that spread down the coast. The railroad arrived. New names, new faces, farmers, oilmen, businessmen, and builders. The city that had once been 44 settlers and a prayer was now swelling with thousands. The angels had grown wings. Yet for all its expansion, Los Angeles never forgot how to reinvent itself. It wasn't just a city, it was a canvas. By the early 20th century, a new industry arrived: the movies. Hollywood, a place where dreams were not just dreamt, they were filmed, projected, and sold to the world. Los Angeles became the city of stars. But beneath the glamour, the old city still murmured. The Tongva were all but invisible, their sacred sites buried beneath highways and houses, their names erased, their stories silenced. But the soil never forgets, and neither does the wind. And sometimes in the hush before dawn, you can still feel them, walking among the hills, watching. Los Angeles became a land of contradictions. It offered freedom, yet enforced segregation. It promised reinvention, yet demanded assimilation. It embraced immigrants from across the world, even as it built walls, physical and invisible, to keep them apart. Mexicans, Chinese, Japanese, African Americans, they all came, all built this city with their hands and hearts, and often paid the price in silence. Riots burned, injustices festered. The city wept more than once, but still it rose. Again and again, not because of its skyline, but because of the souls who refused to leave, refused to surrender, who believed in the promise whispered into its name, the angels. And maybe that's what Los Angeles truly is. Not a place of perfection, not even a city of angels, but a city that is always becoming, always in motion. A city built on bones and dreams, on silence and song. A place where the sacred and the superficial live side by side, where a temple might stand next to a nightclub, where a prayer might float above a traffic jam. Los Angeles was never just a name, it was a story told in many languages through many lives, a story that began with the river and the stars, a story that still isn't finished. And so the story moved forward, as stories always do, not in straight lines, but in spirals, each generation circling back to the same hopes, the same wounds. As the 20th century deepened, Los Angeles became something else entirely. Not just a place, but an idea, a symbol. To some, it was freedom, to others, it was exile. And in between those two truths, millions made their lives. The Dust Bowl migrants came next, in the 1930s. Their farms turned to ash, their futures blown away like the soil they left behind. They arrived in trucks and wagons, hollow-eyed but stubborn, their children sleeping in the back as they crossed deserts, chasing the shimmer of something better. Los Angeles welcomed them with sun, yes, but also with slums, with suspicion, with struggle. Still, they stayed. They planted trees where there was dust. They found dignity where there was little. The angels whispered again, but only if you listened closely. Then came the war. World War II turned Los Angeles into a machine. Shipyards, aircraft factories. The city pulsed with metal and urgency. And once again, people came, from across the country, from across oceans. Japanese Americans were rounded up, their loyalty questioned, their homes seized, their dignity stolen. They were sent to camps in the desert while the city they helped build moved on without them. That silence, too, still hangs in the air. If you pause long enough, it's there. And then there were the black families who arrived during the Second Great Migration, fleeing the suffocating racism of the South. They came with dreams of better, a job, a house, a life with space to breathe. And for a time, Los Angeles did offer that. Neighborhoods grew, communities flourished, churches rang with gospel. But racism is not confined by geography. Redlining, police violence, economic exclusion. It all came with them like a shadow too long to escape. Watts burned in 1965. South Central cried out in 1992. Each time the nation turned to Los Angeles not as a dream, but as a mirror, a reflection of what America hides beneath its smile. And yet, after each fire, after each tear, the people rebuilt. Not because they forgot, but because they believed something better could still be made. This city, for all its glitter and promise, never belonged to just one people, one class, one story. It belonged to the many. Armenians fleeing genocide, Iranians escaping revolution, Salvadorans, Guatemalans, and Mexicans running from civil wars, dictatorships, poverty, each with a suitcase full of memory and a name whispered to the stars. Koreans who turned small storefronts into empires, Filipinos who sent their wages home in quiet envelopes, Chinese immigrants who built railroads and raised families and carved Chinatowns into stone. And through it all, Los Angeles shifted again. Not a static monument, but a living organism. It breathed new languages, new food, new rhythms. Hip-hop rose from the corners of Compton. Spanglish became a love song in East LA. Murals exploded across walls like silent prayers. Portraits of saints and rebels and lost children all gazing down at the streets below. But perhaps the most powerful thing about this city is not just who came or what was built, but what remained. That river, the Porciúncula, still winds through the heart of the basin. Forgotten by many, boxed in by concrete now, but still flowing, still remembering. If water could speak, it would tell you everything. Of the first footsteps, of the Spanish horses, of the shouts of revolution, the silence of deportation, the rhythm of hammers building a home, of laughter, of grief, of generations. The name Los Angeles, the Angels, was never meant to describe skyscrapers or studios. It was born in reverence, in awe. It was born in the prayer of a friar who saw something divine in the land, something sacred in the river's curve. That sacredness perhaps has been paved over, commodified, rebranded, but it is not gone. It waits in the cracks, in the quiet. And maybe that's the real heart of this city, not the myth, not the marketing, but the memory. The soul of Los Angeles is not what it projects outward, but what it holds inward. A city that carries the dreams of its ancestors. The name Los Angeles, the Angels, was never meant to describe skyscrapers or studios. It was born in reverence, in awe. It was born in the prayer of a friar who saw something divine in the land, something sacred in the river's curve. That sacredness, perhaps, has been paved over, commodified, rebranded, but it is not gone. It waits in the cracks, in the quiet. And maybe that's the real heart of this city, not the myth, not the marketing, but the memory. The soul of Los Angeles is not what it projects outward, but what it holds inward. A city that carries the dreams of its ancestors and the pain. A city that promises flight, even if your wings are broken. A city that says, come as you are, but demands you fight to stay. Because staying in Los Angeles is not easy. It never has been. It tests you. It stretches your soul thin. The rent rises, the traffic thickens, the earth shakes, the fires come, the rain vanishes, and yet people stay. They stay because there is something here that refuses to die. A flicker, a spark, a voice that says, maybe, just maybe, tomorrow will be better. You'll find that voice in a corner taco stand at midnight, where a father grills meat to pay for his daughter's tuition. You'll find it in a poet's voice echoing through Limert Park, in a teenager breakdancing on cracked pavement in Boyle Heights. You'll find it in the silence of a grandmother lighting a candle in Koreatown, in the laughter of cousins swimming in someone else's backyard pool. You'll find it in the mothers who walk their children to underfunded schools with backpacks full of hope, in the tired nurses, in the street vendors, in the janitors cleaning glass towers they'll never enter by day. That is Los Angeles. It is not just angels. It is warriors, survivors, builders of new worlds. And still, the name remains, Los Angeles. A name born of faith, carved through colonization, stretched through migration, tested by injustice, and softened by hope. A name that does not fit in one mouth, that cannot be owned by one people. A name that, like the city itself, has lived 1,000 lives.